Yeah.
But it was a very salient point regarding if you become, if you enter the pinball machine of, politics
Yeah.
and media and partisanship, you
Yeah.
become the similitude of the literal pinball, then
Yeah.
you're going to get knocked back and forth, be totally confused,
Yeah.
be essentially
Manipulated.
manipulated, brought into the psychological warfare vortex,
Yeah.
and it's inescapable at that point, mostly inescapable. So
But you see, I suppose you see the public are on a trajectory where they are still coming to terms with the fact that any political views they have are irrelevant, effectively.
yeah. Well, that's
Well,
what
I
I was
mean, but that's the point that we've arrived at. But now maybe we're wrong. You see,
No, I don't think. I don't think we are.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not. I'm not. I'm not saying that hubristically. I mean, I've looked at. See, when you look at politics from historical distance, for example, the Roman Republic and its politics, even 100 years back, the political scene, or even 200 years back, the minutiae of the political scene, it did add up to a larger meta transition, if you will. But to be locked into the thick of it, again, to be the ant in the nest rather than having that vantage point. And funnily enough, it was sort of ironic, my point regarding conservatism, and then you not being in front of the stampede and telling it to stop, right? Steering the stampede, right? As you stated, be proactive, don't be reactionary. A reactionary force will never succeed, because again, as we were stating here, reactionary forces are artificial. They exist and persist and almost parasitically leech off, ironically, the main nest, the main media narrative, or whatever the hell they're reacting to. So this is the problem. If you want to create, as Guido stated, parabiotic systems, you have to be totally beyond that. It doesn't even matter if they're stopping freedom of speech, if that's something that's now coming into view, because all you must do is exist on the periphery, create a parallel system outside of that. Again, all civilization, all society is born of the mind. The collapse, I was going to bring up that point as well. The collapse has already occurred within the mind, and Six brought up that point. It will be gradual. Yes, the physical collapse will be gradual, but like Rome, the collapse had already occurred within the minds of the citizens. By that time, everyone was a citizen, so it lost its exclusivity. A bit like what's happening now to our citizenship throughout the West. It's losing its exclusivity. Therefore, our societies are losing their quality, and they're decaying. But, as I stated, in many ways, you're actually best off accelerating the decay, because the civilization itself is corrupt. You can't reverse decomposition, right? You must accelerate it so it transmutes form, and then you can take on, you can create something new from the fertile soil of death. I mean, this is the problem with existence. At its heart is chaos and death, and again, that's pretty depressing, but
No, well,
you got to use that
yeah. Well,
to your
look at
advantage.
I have a wider thing that I'm trying to understand on that. Oh,
What's that?
I'm trying to kind of get my head around the subjectivity of. You see, I think you can arrive at 2 points. Point A, you understand that the chaos at the center of things, good and evil, are essentially equal to each other. So, if you understand that, then morality is a goner, possibly, probably. So you kind of end up where they go. But point B is you put some sort of value on the greater good, or on truth, or on some value system. And even though you understand that everything's mixed together, good and evil are in the one pot, you still struggle and strive and push for righteousness.
Yeah.
That's point B. So I think they're at point A. They've taken kind of the left-hand path with their understanding. Like, you can't really argue against their understanding because it's subjectively true. But it's outside. The buck stops, I think, with natural law and with righteousness and the good, because the eventual progression of existence is tied in with good. Otherwise, the whole thing would have just completely ground to a halt at some point in time. So therefore, I think like the higher imprint of God really is in good and in the progression of things. You know, the constructive forces over the destructive. You know, so but it's a very troubling thing because I think it's a central, like the likes of, and I don't fully understand it, but as you say, sometimes, Reagan, it's actually a lot simpler than a lot of people understand. So I think it's similar with this stuff, that you can penetrate a lot of this, the likes of Bataille or Foucault. I'm assuming you can penetrate a lot of the dense terminology and use of language with that kind of simple understanding on the macro, that they're coming at a super subjective thing where morality suddenly becomes like an inconvenience, and pitted against the kind of an understanding where natural law or logos or rationality or truth are held as values. And even though you understand the system or you understand the center of things, you still fight for that higher ground because it's something you believe in. Like, it's like
The last frontier.
it's like, it's like if I had all the power in the world to do whatever, and I'd still aim for the good, even though I could destroy it with my, it's like putting your boot on an ant. You have all the power to do that, like to squash that little bug, but there's some bit of you goes, no, I won't do that today, for whatever reason. I just don't want to kill another creature. And it's like, at that moment, even though you have the power, you still chose the greater, the bigger thing, Whereas I don't think they're doing that. I think they're heading for the left-hand path, But the problem is, you see, when you understand the philosophical core of the thing, they are right. As I said to Silas there, if they ask God to acknowledge them if they acknowledge God in their transgression, so they say that God created good and evil. So if I do evil, really, that's just another side of God. So I just acknowledge him in my transgression. Perhaps I'm part of some part of his greater plan. So it's okay for me to do evil because only he really understands what the outcome is,
Well,
so they kind of rationalize it, and that's why it's a sort of a very dangerous thinking, because
it's that idea of sacrifice as well, that they actually believe. So sacrifice, I believe, etymologically comes from a verb to make holy, right? That's, and again, this goes to Bataille. This is why Bataille's, honestly, that George Bataille, even though he's a total madman, I think he's taught.
He's probably a genius, Silas.
No, but I think oh yeah, absolutely. But I think he's getting to this idea of general economy, his idea of general economy, that basically we are all products of waste and death and chaos, right, and violence, and that he states that sacrifice is almost the reason it makes one holy is because you get rid of the excess or the accursed share, as he states, right? Because he states that we are all products of excess, right? That when you can't put the excess into growth or reproduction, that the accursed share becomes the waste. The accursed share must be, sort of mitigated, right? That's the reason for societies. So he states that this accursed share, how was I going to describe this? I've totally lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Yeah, it becomes. Doesn't it become some core factor of the?
Yes, to make it holy. The reason you become holy at that point is because you get rid of the accursed share without profit. Now, what he means by that is the reason human life becomes so unholy, to use that word, or impure, is due to the fact that we become capitalism, and all systems of society render us as little more than numbers, right? They ascribe our value based not on our intrinsic dignity as a human being or our innate divinity, but because of, again, what we can produce for the system, right? And not what we can produce in terms of profit, but what we can produce in terms of consumption and waste. Because he states that is more important than profit. Profit is nothing to these people. The reason they do all of this is to produce waste. Again, waste or exudation would be that thing which is at the center of all. It's the loosh. It's the motion that keeps existence, or the fuel that keeps the motion of existence, that keeps the spokes of the wheels greased, right? Keeps them sparking. So he states sacrifice really makes one holy because you're leaving this world without profit. You're giving up your life without profit. You're getting rid of the accursed share without profit. And he used a word I forget now. But yeah, basically he states that societies do these periodic mass sacrifices of not just human beings, of food, of anything really that could take away scarcity, that could provide surplus to the system. Again, getting rid of this accursed share. I mean, I've had so many thoughts on this just listening to the various podcasts and audiobooks of Bataille over the past couple of weeks. So many I've totally forgot half of it. I'm trying to write as much as I can down, but I'm forgetting it while I'm at work listening to it, and but I believe he's totally onto something. That
Well, like you see, I might be wrong now, but I'm convinced there must be some. Like if you hit a slap on his theory with a cricket bat or a baseball bat or a hurley as we have here, that you'd knock a good few holes in it. Like, I could be wrong.
Certainly, yeah. No, definitely
But
there is
no,
holes
but
in
you
it,
see,
yeah.
but there isn't like, depending on how you look at it. Do you know that kind of a way? Like, where's the accursed share in love? Where is infinite giving? Do you know? I might not have phrased the question. I'm trying to attack his argument by coming at it from another angle and asking an oblique question.
Well, he refers to love and eroticism as, again, it is. He states that it's mere cell division, right? That all of this is to reproduce oneself, but love itself, within the act of love, is produce the fricative motion, right? Okay, to make love, to bond, pair bond in that way. But
But you see, there's division in two ways. There's the division of the self to multiply, but there's also the division of the self in terms of vulnerability. Because you're absolutely self-divided. Your castle walls are down if you're in love. You're completely fragile and exposed. So you giveth, and something can taketh away, a kind of thing. You know what I mean? So he's coming at it from a very. You see, if you could find a chink in his armor, you'd say his view is materialistic. It's a materialistic critique. And you'd hammer him. You'd hammer him just with the use of that word. That's if, and I'm not saying that's a legitimate criticism of his. But if it was, if you could show that it was, you'd hit him straight away right between the two fucking eyes and say that's an absolutely imbalanced, materialistic assertion that underpins all of his philosophy. And doesn't matter how many books or how complex the whole yarn gets after that, it's based on that theory. Even his concept there of the sun. What's that he said about it? The sun fucking.
Well,
he can't produce or something, or of itself. It can only give away.
That, yeah. So because the sun produces a superabundance of energy, that what we are is the sorts of excretions of the sun. We're the excrement of the sun.
But this is the glass half full, half empty thing, right? Are we the excretion of the sun, or are we the gift of love of the abundant mother sun?
Well, this is the thing.
See, that's where you hit him.
I think we're both.
Now you
Yeah,
have it. Yeah.
Now this is
Zeal.
it.
All right, I got this one.
Sorry, man.
Yeah.
Glass half full, half empty.
Yeah.
Zeal, you can't have a glass and it not be full.
That's the Irish code. That's the
Jesus Christ,
ancient
man!
Irish code.
You got me there with the toe of the headbutt.
No, I wrote up a thing on it not too long ago where it was like, no matter what, to have the glass itself, it's filled with air, it's filled with liquid, it's filled, no matter what, it's filled. The idea of having a glass at all, it's always full and it's always overflowing.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it goes back to, it's a kind of a spiritual spoiled child syndrome with a lot of these people. They're
Yeah.
looking at this, and if the fucking sun is shitting down top me, and I'm only humanity is excrement, and I just fuck off. What are you
Well,
fucking talking about?
you're looking at it like an ant, and God
Mm.
with a magnifying glass. Like that's the perception that's being had then. And if
Like,
you're only going to look at it that way, that's how you're going to see it.
exactly. And that's what the likes of I think he's guilty. Now, I could be wrong, Silas. I'm not claiming to be an expert in philosophy or anything like that. I fucking
Oh no,
clue, but
he's a total madman. The guy is a. I mean, if you read his work, he is a literal madman. I'm not.
not necessarily in that he's following the rationale of his insanity, if you know what I mean. He's made rational. Do you know? But as Regan says there, it depends on your position,
Mm,
your starting point. Now, if your starting point is from point, X, you understand it in that way, and you
mm,
rationally understand it and create the philosophy, the worldview from that point. That's not to say, and I'm being devil's advocate, arguing the man's corner
mhm,
here a little bit. But as they say, I might not agree with him, but I'll defend his kind of right to speak or his right to arrive at his truth. But his starting position, in my view, is erroneous. It's a bastard view, a cyclops view of reality. He's looking at it through one eye, and he's looking at it as the forsaken child syndrome.
The Eye of Sauron. He's
Yeah,
like,
I think
you
as
know,
well in terms
they're
of
bourgeois fucking Parisian fashionistas
in
sitting
terms
around
of
drinking coffee, talking about fucking having sex with dead bodies or some shit. Like, it's trying to make it out to be some sort of an artistic. How do you say
well,
it? Fucking.
well, this is the thing. I mean, they now if you look into all mythologies, even the Norse mythology, I was actually talking to my brother about this today. We were just going through because he's pretty much memorized all of the various, from what's his name, Snorri Sturluson, I believe. He in the 13th century, an Icelandic monk, was creating a history, the Eddas, the Havamal. Oh God, so there's a lot of them. These poetic works which detailed the stories of Norse mythology. So as we were discussing some of the various stories from that. He's memorized pretty much all of them. But
Jesus, you're a smart fuckers.
well, no, I mean that's one thing it's the only books that he's actually read. But I always go to him for, Norse mythology. I mean, he knows
Yeah.
the books inside and out. It's quite impressive actually. But I was
Right.
discussing with him some of the deeper meanings of it, and I was sort of, toying with Bataille's ideas. But
Mm.
funnily enough, Bataille's ideas aren't too distinct from my own. I don't
Mm.
mean his perversion.
Mm.
I must make that clear. But what I
Mm.
do mean is the self-division or the self-reaction at the initial point of the source, which
Mm.
I also posit. So
Mm.
therefore, well, it was similar to Odin. So Odin, according to Norse mythology, the creation myth, we emerged from the Gununga gap,
Yeah.
from the interaction between Ymir, the frost giant, the father of the frost giants, suckling the milk from the cosmic cow, Aufumbla, that Odin, who I believe was created from the frost giant Ymir as well, his brothers, Vili and Vray, now again the Trinity, right? You see that in everything, the beginning Trinity. He murdered Ymir, and his carcass, Ymir's carcass, became the world, right?
Mhm.
So even in the creation myth, creation could only be created, if that makes
Like
sense.
death.
Creation could only be created by death. This is, and even in Genesis, it's the same thing. Creation could only be created by the darkness being sort of made asunder, right? That God spoke into existence light. God spoke into existence all of this. To speak is to it's to destroy the peace, right? And again, that's actually what Odin's name means. It means Lord of Frenzy. And when you're frenzied, you're shaken with adrenaline. A bit like the wave, the frequency, right? So the frequency destroyed the peace of the flat line, the mean line of stillness, of the pre-beginning. So whatever way we look at it, chaos had to be the first stage within creation. I mean, it's the total inverse, you would think, of what it should be. It should be life, but creation is an act of chaos. It's crazy to think along those lines, but it's what these people are using. Chaos is the currency at the heart of existence, and they're using. I mean, they're using it. It's what they do. It's everything is surrounding it. Or either I might be totally fucking incorrect. I just may be looking at it too deeply, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I actually envy like the individuals we were talking to, because in many ways their format, though it's a stark change from our own. I think a lot more people sort of clue into that. They tune into that.
Yeah.
Sort of base conversations. I don't know. But maybe we were just overthinking all of this. I don't know.
No, I thought to be fair,
No.
like they're a bit disarming. Like they're well able to talk, and they're very
Oh, yeah.
well educated on their topics, but they do come across a bit genial. Like, but there's no harm in that. You know what I mean?
Oh no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
In many ways, as I said, I envy it.
Yeah.
I've never been one of the. I don't know. I just can't. I can't hold. I can't hold those conversations. I'm not much of a conversationalist to begin with, so.
We do go away. That's not true, man.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's where I'm
you're
at to
good.
interject, Silas.
Yeah. Cheers, lad.
What's going on,
But when-
Dante?
Going on, man.
Hey, I'm going pretty good. Sorry,
But that concept of chaos being at the center of creation, Silas, is you understand that as the primordial soup, the undifferentiated potential of all things, that everything is, in a whirlpool, and it's vibrating together, and it's expansive, and it's unstable because it's a composition of opposites. Is that your kind of understanding of chaos? And then the creative moment comes when there's an explosion of that, or
No,
something.
I think so. As I was stating, any concept that comes into existence, anything tangible, intangible, something even within the mind, for it to exist, it also has to birth its opposite.
Right.
In the pre-beginning, outside of existence, outside of the state of separation, or after this chaos of creation, right? There had to be peace prior to that, like silence, oneness. There would have been pure equilibrium. I mean, it's unfathomable to us. We can't fathom it. I mean, we can only really fathom it as darkness. Just the darkness of the pre-beginning, right? But death and life had to exist within a sort of singularity. And it was only after chaos that must have been broken, must have been separated. And at that point, that's where the fricative forces, the fricative force, spurred on existence, spurred on reproduction, as Bataille states, excess and all of that. So sacrifice was at the beginning of existence. What he states is you can see that within the sun. The horizon line is almost like the throat of the sun being cut, and the sun's radiance as it's bleeding onto the planet, and we receive that without without any gift to bestow upon it. But that's not the case. He states, for example, in the Aztec religion, obviously there was human sacrifice, but he states within every religion, within every society rather, that exists. They have to get rid of the accursed share. So it's this sort of, I don't know, it's a sort of a, there's a sacrifice heaven makes to have us, but we also generate our own sacrifice here via wars and all of these other various means to get rid of the excess, right, as he calls it, which I deny that. I don't think there is excess or surplus, but he states that we have to get rid of the waste, the accursed share, to then generate existence, to perpetuate existence. So I mean, they're using exactly that's. I think Bataille and his theory of general economy, just similar to what I've stated, broad. I'm being very general here, but I think he's on to the modus operandi that they are using in terms of their rotational farming and all of that. They're not seeking to generate profit. They don't give a fuck about profit. What it's about is generating chaos. It's about generating waste. It's about generating decomposition.
With a view to?
With a view to perpetuate power. That's it. It's a view to maintain power. They don't care about profit. They generate profit from fiat. The fiat permits them to steer. Again, fiat, let it be, from Latin. To steer the buffalo run. To steer the chaos. To steer the sort of inevitable drive of humanity and nature towards producing that waste, that excess. And it's similar to, I mean, I'm not being sick, but Bataille states this. It's similar to sex, right? So you reach that explosive threshold based on the centrifugal sort of, again, I'm trying to be polite here, the centripetal and centrifugal force of the phallus, right? Or the serpent, right?
Yeah.
Which is what we see in symbolism. And the rotational force of the heavens, right? The circle is the geometric shape of the heavens.
Yeah.
Again, similar to the womb, right? He states that, and this is why you always see the dialectical camps, and they have the dualistic divide. They're always along two lines, black and white, and they're always having that tug of war, that centripetal force, and then behind it will always be the larger sort of black hole sun of the establishment. There's other things that Bataille stated. I mean, there's so much. To be honest, I've told to even discuss it. I mean, you're sort of pulled in many directions. Even discussing it.
As a thought experiment, right? Just because I can't get my head around this really in a kind of a tangible manner. It's not clicking for me. But as a thought experiment, could you give your understanding, for example, of how a civilization, take whoever they were, say Aztec, might have arrived at the concept of human sacrifice based on what you've applying Bataille's theory to the priest class or whoever might have engaged in that as a way to, related to the forces and the processes that you're talking about. Could you do, as a thought experiment, explain how that might have worked if I don't know if the question is clear.
Absolutely. It's because we all have that common fractal essence within us. It's the initial thought. It's thought that hasn't been, it's the thought that is the vital essence of us, which animates us, which keeps us from being, a cold corpse. It provides us the beautiful illusion of life, the warmth, if you will, the fire. It's that reason because we contain that archetypal essence. I mean, you can call it the demiurge or whatever. It's that essence. We almost reflect the macrocosm. We reflect the heavens on earth in many ways. I think.
So do you think that is what you're getting at there, that the act of human sacrifice in those civilizations was an attempt to extinguish that essence?
Well, I mean, there's many ways of looking at it, but yes, it's to get rid of the excess. That's the the broad. If you were to look at it esoterically or in a higher sense, right, a hidden sense, that's the reason for it. It's to reflect what we see in the heavens. That same sacrifice, that same again, it's getting rid of that accursed share, because again, like sex, right? Like sex, you reach that explosive threshold, right? Not meaning to be sick, but this is the way Bataille puts it. You reach the explosive threshold, and you must you must sort of release the pressure. Again, you have to get rid of the accursed share, that excess which is produced from the activity, right? Or again, there is no or. It just has to go, right? And it's an inevitability at that point. So what he states, similar to the bony proliferation or industry preceding population growth, when the population grows, because of limiting factors such as geography and also political factors as well, psychosocial factors, you have to get rid of that accursed share at that point, right? Because if you don't, the abundance of life, like it creates cancer to death, right?
Mm.
The death of the power structure. Inevitably, that's its basic principle.
Okay.
That's the way they look at it. So it maintains
Okay.
scarcity, maintains artificial scarcity.
Yeah, it's a little bit more clear now. So it's kind of like, yeah. So that I think you put it. Basically, it grows into their enemy.
Yes,
Effectively.
that's it. You will always have the opposite. So if you have an overabundance of life, it will inevitably create death. So for example, what you're seeing in America right now, you've got an overabundance of luxury, right?
Yeah.
I believe Bataille states civilizations that are ripe for the bleeding are ones who have an overabundance of luxury, right? They grow fat in their luxury. They eat heartily from the trough. They become dependent, as we were mentioning in that other discussion. So as you're seeing in America, not just America, I don't mean to pick on the Americans, guys, in the whole entire West, but, America is the heartland of the Anglo-American Empire. So in America, they have grown fat on that luxury. And as you're seeing right now, it's going absolutely insane. It's, as we're seeing with the establishment, they're looking for a war. They're looking for some conflict, either domestically or externally. And that's not just to maintain their power. They're also seeking to get rid of that accursed share, right? Because human sacrifice never ended with the Aztecs or the Mayans. It continues on. It has to. Any society that is going to survive long term has to have periodic mass sacrifices via war or artificially induced starvation via inflation or something like that, or austerity. That's just a purge. Yeah.
Because it threatens the power structure.
Yes. Yeah, because it can turn into cancer.
That's the key point, though, isn't it? It's from that perspective.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
with everyone catching on and all these various groups, going down all different sorts of paths, right? Esoteric or not,
Yeah.
they're challenging the system, because even all these podcasters who are indirectly controlled opposition or whatever they are also pose a direct threat to the power structure that's influencing them to do that in the first place.
Yeah.
So just like you see in our jobs, Zeal, like that's all I've experienced in my entire career. All my bosses are terrified of me. And I never understood why. I didn't know for many years. I was so confused because, like, just like a simp to a girl. Like my whole approach to my career for a long time was, what do you need me to do, right? And just I'll help you out and do this and that. The way that they took it was that I was trying to undermine their job secretively somehow, right? And like that's what happens here with kings and queens. Everyone's out to get the king and queen in their mind, you know. And right now, I think that's the whole overpopulation thing. To them, it's true. The world is
Yeah.
overpopulated to them.
Yeah.
And if any significant number of us pooled our resources and whatever else, we would pose a massive threat to the system that be, to those who are in control, right? Like what it would take 10%, I think they said, of the existing population to flip, and we would overrun them instantly. You know, most government
Yeah.
agencies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they got to reduce the numbers. There's too
Yeah.
many of us that can collect and do stuff, and you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
even
Yeah.
the AI goddess or god that they bow to or whatever it is, you know,
Yeah.
like it's probably telling them there's too much. Like we have to kill people. We
Yeah.
have to cut the excess, and it's justifiable under whatever guise they want to use, whether it be a jihad or whether it be right, because a jihad's a holy war. And I mean, even when you guys were talking about that, like being holy, you know, even as a kid, I was like, that doesn't always sound like a good thing. You know, being holy could be like getting shot up, like Scarface.
Mm. Mm.
You're filled with holes.
12,000 bullets. Yeah.
Well,
Like it's
the
kind.
thing I heard, your man Michael Black, that commentator, he mentioned that it was holy meant to reconcile your dark and light sides into one, that you could accept, know thyself. That was his thing on it, which I thought was interesting. But just
Well,
I
it's
want to
just
make
a
a quick,
perception.
yeah. But a quick observation on Bataille, right? Like the most recent, I suppose, understanding was around Lush that Silas was talking about in terms of the rationale for the harvest. So it was Lush in terms of, let's just say roughly, the harvesting of human souls or human energy. Whereas when you move from Lush into Bataille, now you're not harvesting for the sake of harvesting. Now you're harvesting because you have to harvest because of the accursed share. Because eventually that's going to kind of take you down. So there's a movement now, Silas, if you're still there, in the. Am I right in saying that? I think I am right in saying that, or a deeper understanding of
Yes,
it.
it's basically an extension of Lush, what Lush
Yeah.
is in the garden. Interestingly as well,
But it's a
that
fucking size. It's a seismic change, Silas, because you move them from being mere predators into agents who are aware of the cyclical nature of these things and are hanging on for dear life and have to sort of destroy to hold power.
well,
If you know
that's
what I mean.
what Abraham. See, when I discussed the idea of the people of the idea, not
Yeah.
that's what the Kabbalists state. And I was listening to a few Kabbalists and discuss this fact that the Hebrews it comes from the etymology of Eber, meaning to cross, right? It doesn't mean the idea of crossing the Red Sea. I mean, it's not historical. It's a giant metaphor, right? And I discussed that actually one of the sets of notes. I mean, it's too much to get into now, but in essence, what he stated, the Kabbalist stated, is they crossed something. They crossed the threshold. That's why Hebrews have survived for so long, watching
Yeah.
all of these empires rise and fall. And somebody
Yeah.
says, well, you're just saying they're gods. No, that's not what I'm stating. They are people not of the book, but people of an idea.
Yeah.
They've figured out something very deep within
Yeah.
society, within nature.
Yeah.
They've found the sort of reflectivity throughout
Yeah.
all of these various, not just their own social constructs which are extensions of our own biology and mentality and our spirit. But the very origin point of that said spirit that is contained within us, and they understand all of this, right? This idea of general economy
It's a
from
science.
it's a
You
science,
understand
yeah,
it?
yeah. That's why they've survived, and we've all been artificially raised up and destroyed. I mean, in essence, that's it. But however, not again. Not I'm not saying all Jewish people are part of some big conspiracy. No, not at all. What I'm saying is there's a certain clique of Abrahamists, not just Jews, Christians, and Muslims,
Yeah.
who seem to have understood this idea. They're utilizing this idea for what I would state a nefarious end, right?
Yeah.
Again, sacrifice. They're literally what Bataille's stating they are doing. I mean, even in the religions as well. Do you notice it always begins with the father? Do you notice that? Never begins with the father and the mother. That comes after. Everything comes from the father. Now, going back to that idea of the circle, right? The womb, the vagina, right? And the centrifugal and centripetal force, which would be the phallus, right? Again, this sort of sex act. You see that within, for example, the Freemasonry logo, very similar, right? That's sort of similar principle. See that in Kabbalah with the Sephirot. You have Bina and Chokhmah. Chokhmah would be the sort of phallus of, the wisdom, if you will. And Bina would be understanding, or the chalice, the cup, which is filled, right? Again, the womb. Again, that circle. So I think this goes to the understanding of what the hell they're worshipping, right? And what all of these religions worship, even the Norse pantheon. It all begins with the Father. The Father is the Lord of the Duat. He who plays, induces the tug of war between the centripetal and the centrifugal, right? And through this, it generates chaos. Again, like the Lord of Frenzy, like Odin, the Lord of Frenzy, that vibratory motion, you're sort of seething, you're shivering with adrenaline, right? Again, like the wave, the frequency, the logos. That's why in the beginning there was the word, right? It all goes back to this. There was chaos. In the beginning there was chaos. The Father created chaos, where previously it would seem, by inference, the Mother, the maternal whatever, the maternal spirit, or the sort of spirit that was not divided into gender, there was complete and utter peace. I don't know. That's the again that's this idea really goes to the heart of the conspiracy. If you don't really understand this, like what we were doing on the talk tonight, I mean, you get caught up in a meme. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You get lost in, oh my god, they're shutting down the memes. Okay, unfortunately, it's a little bit bigger than that. This whole thing, that's just the way of the world. It's just that I would rather it was just very simple, and we could just talk about, fuck them.
Again,
We can have our memes and all that.
again, it's you see, an earlier conversation, we spoke about the creation as, a creator, shall we say, God or monad, who reached into the primordial chaos and, separated out into order, into the creation. So it's slightly different now to what you stated there. Actually, it's completely different, because what you've stated there is the mother, or the genderless. It's confusing to say mother because obviously female, but
Pure
the
potential. Yeah.
the genderless pure
Mhm.
potential was at a state of peace, and chaos was subsequently created. And you'd have to fill in the blanks there as to how the creation then subsequently yet again came out of the chaos. But there are two different models of the engine room, if you will. One in which point A, number one, is the undifferentiated potential, the sea of chaos, all things in one, vibrating against each other because they're opposites, and it's in a state of vibration. It's highly unstable, radioactive. It's trying to shoot. The good and evil is trying to burst apart from each other, and either it is in a natural cycle where it expands due to the vibration. It's a constant state of expansion until it reaches a critical point.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Go on.
Sorry, man, I totally interjected. Finish your point.
No, interject away. I'm just trying to extrapolate really the differences in the two models of understanding.
If I understand correctly what you're stating, how did that inertia dissipate? How did it end, or how did it transition into motion, to chaos? Is that what you're getting at?
I'm trying to establish. You see, what is point number one? In your point, in version A, point number one is a peaceful sea, which a creator stimulates into chaos, right? In point number two, model number two, the initial point is not a peaceful sea. It's already in a primordial, expansive, unstable, heaving mass.
Ah, right. So it'd be the former would be more akin to what I would think. So the creator isn't an entity. When I am discussing that idea of the centrifugal and centripetal, the tug of war between the separation, right? Really, it was generated because within pure potentiality, again undifferentiated, there had to be that innate. Again, it's like what Bataille states. Because thought had to precede everything, right? Logically speaking, because thought had to precede everything, hence it created sentience and what we see, the tangible form, that which we can sort of process, understand vis-a-vis thought, consciousness, and of course the lower emanations of the mind. So thought is a highly reactive substance. So even in the stillness, even in the peace, there had to be that source of potential for self-reaction, right? The way the mythologies seem to discuss it, for example, with Odin, it seems to be, and the Gnostics sort of echo this, it seems to be that he wanted form where there was formlessness and Gununga gap. That he wanted, it's almost like he wanted self where there was selflessness. So he developed a consciousness based around self, which again, like the mind, formed the separation. Again, it's similar to that Dark Side of the Moon album cover, right? You had formlessness, the pure white light, the prism of the mind, the generative shape, the generative, generative shape, the triangle, then hit that and it refracted out again, like the prism of the mind, right? So
in that model, the consciousness is not in the prima materia. It's not in the chaotic sea. It's not existent. It exists only within the creator. So the creator imprints, the consciousness is imprinted into the creation at the act of creation. So the consciousness imprint, fractal in creation, remains an artifact of divine presence. I'm only trying to iron out the minutiae of the actual mechanical model of the thing.
No, I see what you're saying. I would argue that thought, again, if we can argue if that is consciousness or not, but thought, again, thinking about it now, before, I know it's so instantaneous, but when one gets thoughts into their mind, it's an almost, it's unconscious. Or not unconscious. It happens instantaneously. It happens as a natural flow of living, right?
Right. You're not consciously in control of your thoughts every second.
Exactly. Exactly. Only until that thought that you had in your mind is then processed, that you had housed in your mind, if you will, right? Or potentially didn't come from your mind, but was housed in your mind, right? That it was then processed through the mind. Then it was you may vocalize it, you may also convey it through action as well, right?
Yeah. So
But
I guess the way I think. Oh, go ahead. But
no, sorry, please, you go.
I guess that's my best answer for me would be I would label thought as an expression in consciousness, not necessarily representative of it in itself.
Perfect. Yes, yes. That's yeah. I would go with that. That's a brilliant way to answer it. That so thought is that it's reactive, right? We cannot. I would concede that point. Yeah, it's not consciousness, but it's a sort of first principle of consciousness. And again, from that first principle is we would agree that thought is reactive. Thought can only reproduce itself through reacting with other thoughts. So that's my understanding. So there was always that inclination in the pure potential undifferentiated, which is the thought, right? Or is the potential for it. Hence, for the potential to become not discharged, but for the potential to become discharged, which it was always inevitably going to do because it was the thought, and hence it's self-reactive. Thus, it's an inevitability. It's an ineluctable destiny of the thought to self-react if it has no other thoughts to react to. Thence, from that self-reaction or self-division came existence. That was the force of creation. Wasn't necessarily the creator. I mean, that's just a metaphor. But I mean, it came the force of creation from chaos. It was what they really worship is that word. It's the discharge of that pure potential. They don't really. I don't think they worship the pre-beginning, that which came before. The pure potential. I don't think they worship that. They don't worship God, right? They worship the Lord. They don't worship God, but they are envious of that power. I think that idea that you can shape, you can become the origin point of the pattern of creation. What would the word be? You can become the singular point of the entire root and the branch system of the tree of creation. I mean, that's what Homo Deus is all about. Dataism. That's exactly what they're attempting to do. Recreate the universe, essentially. I mean, that's pretty much what they're talking about. Harari speaks in Homo Deus about going out and controlling the entire universe, recreating it from the ground up.
When you talk about the thought self-dividing, or the thought as of itself, because it has nothing to reflect against, it becomes, what I'm trying to nail down is the reaction of that point where creation happens from undifferentiated potential into creation. So what is the mechanism that explosive moment occurs? What is the actual? Is it divine, or is it some systemic expansion that goes beyond the critical mass?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It hits that explosive threshold where the potential has to discharge.
Okay.
Right? You see it within society. I mean, as I've stated as well, you see it in the sex act. Right?
Yeah.
You hit that explosive threshold, and not meaning to be sick at all, but just to make
it makes sense.
You have no control over it. It's ineluctable. It's inescapable. You can't
but
stop
I
it at
suppose
a certain threshold.
in the undifferentiated potential, you have the polar opposite. Like it has to be a highly, one would imagine, highly unstable arrangement, like radioactive, because you've got elemental oppositional forces.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
They're struggling. They're repelling against each other.
Mhm.
So if you would imagine this mechanical model, that the creator is actually outside of all this, and he sets the whole thing in a perpetual
See what you're saying?
motion machine.
Yes.
So it expands. It has to expand as all these oppositional forces try to escape each other. And then at a certain point, they hit the pin and the balloon bursts. There's a pin. There's a pin somewhere in the mechanism.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
Lucifer, maybe.
Mm.
Maybe. And that might time, or maybe not. But some point, some critical point where the thing expands, it hits a point and bang. And it sets about the full cycle.
Yeah.
Then you have created the separation of things. Then if you follow into the Bataille kind of line of thinking, you've got what does he call it? The accursed share,
The accursed share. Well, that's exactly it. Yeah.
but that
Yeah.
eventually brings the system back into a state of collapse,
Yes.
perhaps, unless you've got the power structure who have realized all this mechanism, as you were saying earlier on there. They've figured this kind of stuff out on some deep level, and they've harnessed it or trying to
Well, this is
usurp
Zeal.
it.
See what you've just stated there, and I mean, you've described it better than I could. What you've just stated there, that's why they believe when they do all of these nefarious things that they're actually sort of channeling God. They're doing something holy. That it's holy work that they're doing, right? Simply because they're sort of
They've acknowledged God in their digression.
yes.
Or sorry, in their not digression. What was it?
Their
Transgression.
yes.
They've acknowledged
This
God in
is
their
it.
transgression.
They've acknowledged God in their transgression. This is it. And they're also, they believe that the transgression is almost like a sort of holy sacrament,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And this
Yes.
is it. We're getting to it. This is why Podesta has Jeffrey Dahmer, statues all over his wall. This is why they promote paedophilia. Anything
Yeah.
to bring about decay, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to get rid of the accursed share. And in a global perspective, what is the accursed share at this point? It's the Occidens, right? As you were stating, the setting sun in Latin, right? The Occident, right? It's the West. Literally,
Yeah.
they're getting rid of the West. The sun is now setting on the West, ironically, right? The land of the setting sun. The East is the land of the rising sun. So, of course, there's a grand ritual there.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're seeing it. There's
The morning
accursed
star.
exactly the accursed share. but the thing is, the Venus is the morning and evening star. That's also another interesting thing.
Accuser. I'm actually, for some reason, I equated Lucifer with the morning star, but I think I'm wrong on that. Actually, sorry.
No. I believe he was called the morning star. Jesus, in fact, was called the morning star. Funnily enough, right at the end of the Bible. I forget now where. It's very the last couple of chapters of Revelation.
What I don't get is how have they anticipated they're doing sort of some aspect of the divine work or sacred work if it's in the knowledge that they're trying to maintain their own power? Like how can they acknowledge God in their transgression if their act is a transgression against God? Well, in essence,
no, they would not see it like that. They wouldn't see it. They again, it's that idea, and I had the same. That was a sort of epiphany moment when I was listening to Bataille. It's all sort of coming back to me regarding that they believe they're acknowledging God through their transgression, and the reason being is because, like what you have stated, you've created a sort of divergent model from mine, which again your model could be totally correct as well, where they see that the creator is outside of this all.
Yeah.
That it was the word, it spurred on the frenzy of chaos of the cosmos.
Yeah.
Thus they believe they're reflecting upon earth what is in heaven, right? Thou will shall be done in earth, on earth as in heaven. Do you see what I'm saying? Right. I walk through the shadow of the valley of death, and I shall fear no evil. Yeah, because thou art with me. But what is thou? What is thou?
Yeah.
Not the creator. It's the consciousness of self. right? It's this
Yeah.
point of separation.
So
It's
for
the
them,
Lord of
this is a
Friends.
matter of destiny. They've arrived. Like, this is a matter of divine ordinance of destiny that they are to become God. That's they're following their, trajectory of destiny, or they're trying to realize it. So there's no moral quandary for them. They're sort of a part of God.
That's
I
it.
think.
They believe they are doing God's will on earth, just as all holy warriors believed that they were doing God's will when they were, chucking the babies into the burning pyre, right? It's that type of twisted mentality that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, essentially. I'm not saying they're even morally good. I just believe that they have this sort of priestly demeanor where they think they are beyond all of this. That they're the answer to a higher calling. And that's an extremely, along with fiat currency, that is an extremely destructive recipe, But as well, Bataille also brought up this point, and there was a game that I was playing called Amnesia: The Dark, the Machine of Pigs, a machine for pigs, and I was watching a video on YouTube regarding it. This individual breaking down, tying in George Bataille's work with that game, which the game is based off Bataille's work, funnily enough. And total epiphany moments throughout the entire, all of it. And he brought up this point that the machine for pigs, that all of these sort of human, half-human pigs, right? Within the game, he creates this factory. It's a utopia where the more waste that is created, the more productive and efficient the system is, right? That he sort of bases all of his profit on byproduct and waste, right? Again, like general economy, like Bataille. But within it, all of these various the new breed, the mutant breed of these sort of half human, half pigs, these pigmen, they're all what did he state? They're all rich men that he basically brought in via the allure of profit. And an epiphany hit me at that moment. They've created their perpetual motion machine based on waste and sacrifice and all of this chaos, right? Bringing in or sort of entrancing the rich, the king, the powerful, the captains of industry and wealth and what have you of these various foreign nations. They've brought them in like the pigs, right? That they are, the greedy pigs, vis-a-vis alluring them by profit, by the promise of profit from this system of chaos. But they are the architects of their own self-destruction, and they have to be. That's the integral ingredient in the recipe of the perpetual motion machine, this rotational farming of the human cattle, this system that they've brought into existence, they've created for this purpose of controlling us and maintaining their power through periodic cults, periodic mass sacrifices. Again, getting rid of the accursed share. But yeah,
Just for clarification, where is their own self-destruction? If they profit from that system, where is their own self-destruction impregnated into that system?
as we're seeing now. So for example, with the stock market, you have Lockheed Martin, all of these various corporate entities, even the political class, which is paid for by these corporate entities and what have you. The corporate entities are essentially controlled by the central banks, right? In fact, the entire economy is provided to us at the gratitude, the generosity of the central banks, right? They control the medium of exchange, of course. So really, what we're seeing with, for example, Israel, you have this sort of what would be called neocons, this neocon culture that promotes war, that promotes in society self-division, right? Promotes all of these chaotic actions, because firstly, it provides them profit materially speaking, right? But in time, it eventually destroys the system, right? It leads them to things like the vaccine, the getting everyone to take a vaccine because some of the the bureaucracy makes money off it, right? The bureaucracy and the corporate structure are all in bed together. So they're all promoting the vaccine. All the while you have a higher, because it's all compartmentalized, you have the higher structure based around the central banks and all of that, the controllers of that. They have weaponized these vaccines, should we say. They could, as we're saying, there is a sort of cull mechanism to them, right? So that's one aspect of it, where the higher essence has sacrifice on its mind, and the lower essence sort of works in tandem, not in tandem directly with them, but indirectly, via the allure of profit and money. So,
You were saying there, the lower essence
mm,
is doomed as such. It
Yeah.
gets sucked into the void eventually as well and goes down the Swanee with everything
exactly,
else. But the higher essence always sneaks
always
off.
exists. It always exists. Yeah, yeah,
Oh yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes a
It's-
lot of sense.
So basically, they're using them as pigs. Is like what you see.
Yes.
It's a machine for pigs. They are the pigs.
Oh, I
And
get you. Yeah, I get you.
they are the
I get you.
greedy, and like pigs, they'll eat anything you put in front of them, right?
Yeah.
You put
Yeah.
a big World War III, and you're like, money, right?
Yeah.
They'll, like pigs, they'll just eat it without question, because that's what they are. They're fat pigs, and pigs
But
create the greatest. They're the easiest animal to rear on a farm. That's why
But is
peasants raise them.
your understanding that this
Mm.
structure behind the curtain is still this like kind of Radonite Hyksos, pre-Babylon North Indian Yahweh worship and
Yes, I would. It looks that way. It looks that
Yeah.
way. But again, I think they're beyond religions at this point. I mean,
Yeah.
whoever they are, they're a handful of people. They must be, whatever they are. But even if they died, the idea still continues because it's written. It's literally written in the stars. It's etched into nature. You can.
Yes.
If you're observant enough, you can find it. It's present within nature.
And
Enough
are they ultimately to try and answer the question sort of objectively, are they fulfilling a kind of a natural function in the wider order, or are they aberrant fucking, how do you say, are they an offense to nature or offense to divinity, or are they somehow filling some sort of a Shiva-esque destructor role?
Well, see, I'm going to be very controversial here, and say they're actually doing everything in keeping with that natural law. It's sort of nature is acting vicariously through them. I mean, that's what it seems to me. But maybe I've become pretty jaded by it all.
Well, you're back to that point of they acknowledge God in their transgression.
Yeah.
In their iniquity, they acknowledge God. In their sadism, in their perversion, they acknowledge God. So you can see why the whole thing, the concept is so fucking dangerous because,
But
you
the
know what I
thing
mean?
is, in all of our transgressions, we acknowledge God. Like, in both our transgressions and our triumphs, God is speaking through us. I mean, this is the issue, because all of it leads to a convergence point eventually. It's like a vortex.
I remember going out with this. I was going out with this. I've
Mm.
seen this Muslim girl. She was so beautiful a few years ago, but she was a fucking nightmare. And I was always trying to get, look, are you into me and this relationship or not? And she'd always say to me, it's not. It's all in God's hands. So there's a kind of a thing like that there's no responsibility taken. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In a sense, because the framework of understanding is you put yourself in the mind of God as opposed to the mind of man. you think in that wider subjective field rather than the humble man on the spot sort of thing. I kind of get that from it. I don't know if that's making sense or not.
I would, again, this will be totally controversial, but I think again, if we understand God as pure potential, undifferentiated and unmanifested, then we are all the sort, and we are that fractal. We're a fractal of that essence, right? Then man and God, there is no distinction between them. There's the only tangible material reverberation of God at this present moment on earth is through man. Man is the only conduit to God.
And nature?
And yeah, in nature, of course, in the animal kingdom, none of them seem to revere God.
But go on with your point.
Yeah, no, that was just the point.
Yeah.
It seems that man and God are inextricable. So there is
we're not in some sort of relationship of order and power in relation to God being a source as such, and we being matter fractals of that source, that we're in a hierarchical, that surely we can't equate ourselves with God.
No, not necessarily. I wouldn't. I don't know. See, this is a fine line. I'm still thinking on this, but no, we're not. I wouldn't equate ourselves with God because again, we can only be
perhaps we could. Perhaps that's what the Christ's vision and message is. Is it as such? Maybe there's no. Maybe there's no.
Yeah.
But maybe we can manifest that godhood. Who knows?
Well, that's it. Yeah.
Well, that's the miracles.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, Christianity is a mystery religion. I believe it uses a mysterion, or the mystery of Christ. I think it's like 12 or 15. Yeah, was it 15 times? So in the New Testament, and if you take into the apocryphal works, the non-canonical texts, I mean, it goes up to where this idea of the mystery of Christ goes well up to I believe 40 or 50 times it's used. So, I mean, this is what they obviously tried to. They didn't really want Christianity being a mystery religion by a certain time period, right? By at least the Council of Nicaea. What was that? 327 AD. That was it. That was the sort of crossing of the Rubicon. That it was, Christianity was merely going to be a revealed religion. That Gnosticism was out the window, and Catholicism was, the Orthodoxy was taking its place, almost fully. But yeah, I think as well they have to get rid of the accursed chair after a while, because I think people start to grasp what the fuck's going on after a while, and they have to destroy the knowledge. The same thing happened in Rome. The Gnostics and all of that were beginning to understand what the fuck was going on, right? Pardon my French, but they were understanding everything, all of this shit, and it's once you understand.
Are they linked in with? Or sorry to cut across. Are they linked in with the Kabbalists, the Gnostics?
Yeah,
Gnosticism.
There is tie-ins between all religions. They all intersect vis-a-vis this idea, inevitably. I mean, through all of the mythology, it's echoes through the symbolism, the mythos, the characters, the archetypes, all of that. It echoes. So there is they intersect there. Of course, the Kabbalists created Christianity, destroyed paganism, but paganism was on the decline as well because of other reasons.
Can we take it the Kabbalists are agents of Abrahamism in a sort of a malevolent sense, or a kind of a conspirational sense?
Yes, because it seems that Abraham, the father of this all, whatever he was, he may have been a metaphor for something else. He seemed to have found an idea, again, as I stated, this idea that we're talking about, right? this idea of literally venerating God through chaos, essentially. I mean, ultimately, that's what it seems to be talking about, and Bataille just outlines it. Really, I don't know. Is
I'll have
anyone?
to read this guy's stuff. I haven't even heard of him until you spoke about him today.
I've got to be honest. Honestly, I would listen to commentaries on his work, or if you
Okay.
can, yeah, the audiobooks. They're pretty fucking twisted. I'm not gonna be around the bush. They're pretty fucking
But
twisted.
when you're looking into all this stuff,
Mm.
that was always the problem. Like as a child, right? Was the evil nature of it, or at least the perception that it's all evil and death and horridness and all this other stuff. You know, that's kind of what they phased over in like Catholic school, right? Like, and they give you all these hypocritical answers and stuff like that. But if you're really going to look into the birth of creation and like what is God, or you know, a creator, or whatever, just like in the Norse mythologies or the Greek mythologies or in all of any of the other organized and non-organized religions. I mean, all the spiritual religions are extremely, you know, detrimental when it comes to that kind of stuff. And they just, but because there's a truth to it, you know what I mean? And there's some sort of flashpoint within that set of rules where
Mhm.
you just create either a morally right person that's really well versed in spiritualism and high vibrations and whatever you want to call it, or you develop a crazy psychopathic, sociopathic type of personality because they get totally lost in
Mm.
the negative, you know. That's where I find like that negentropy is a very real thing that's obviously got a negative tagline on it, but is it really all that bad? I mean, that just is the act of creation of, you know, how we uh, duplicate each other. Like it's a destructive force.
Mhm.
Like we just call it rape when the woman's supposedly unwilling, but in any act of sex, it's a very destructive thing. It's fricative. It's about expansion and contraction and climax. That's the entire purpose and point, and all of your pleasure and pain is experienced in that, right? Like you kept talking about it earlier, Silas. It's the womb and the phallic symbol,
Mhm.
right? It's just that is the act. There's destruction inhibited in the creation. It doesn't really work any other way. Not to say that it, like, you know, obviously there's things that grow and grow and grow just
Mhm.
fine, but eventually everything grows to a maximum point of some sort, a
Yeah.
climax, a peak, and then it starts to go the other way. I mean, other than something like the tree of life, but that's kind of this intermediary
Mm.
between earth, heaven, spiritualness, other dimensions, whatever you want to chalk it up to. I mean, it's kind of all up to your perception of it. But
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think honestly that's it. That's the crux of everything that's going on that we're seeing, that we have saw throughout human history.
so I would say the Kabbalists are people who took it too far. Or
Crossed over the line.
They crossed
yeah,
like Eber to cross. You know, the Hebrew
they
Eber.
crossed the Red
Cross.
Sea. They
Yeah,
they they crossed the river of blood. They
that's it.
they've now got bloodlust. They now,
Yeah.
just like any
Yeah.
type of addiction, once you actually cross that point, you know,
There's something in the Zohar about it that it's something to do with redemption. I don't know where I came across that. That once you had accepted your sin as normal, you had crossed the line. You know, you had normalized your transgression, and then
Right.
now you were over on the other side. You know, you had.
Oh, redemption through sin. That idea, yeah.
Yeah.
That's totally Bataille, by the way. That's totally in keeping with Bataille, that idea of redemption through sin.
There's a fella I know not too far from here. He's a total chain smoker, Pat Mack. And And whenever he gets the thought to give up the cigarettes, he smokes more. That's his whole philosophy: smoke more.
Jesus
Dive in
Christ.
harder. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I've done it. I get it. Yeah.
yeah.
When
But
I
it's
was
like in
smoking,
that addiction thing ties in with it all, Reagan. I think that addiction dynamic.
because
It's like
everyone's addicted. Everyone's got an addiction problem. That is life. We're here. You exist. You're a
yeah,
kinetic being. And it's honestly, that's like to simplify it all. That's how I see it, where it's just a simple matter of the choice,
Mm,
which is the free will.
yeah,
And there are people in excess who have made those choices and crossed that line and decided to stay there. I think
yeah.
redemption is really the act of coming back,
yeah,
you know. The fallacy is that you get redeemed by committing the acts and then asking for forgiveness later. Like that's a fallacy. No, the idea of what creation is would see through that.
I think as
Right.
well that. Sorry, Regan. Please finish your point.
Oh, I just said right. That was.
All
Go
right.
ahead.
No, you brought up that point. It's similar to Train Spotting. You know that the
yeah,
famous lines.
Yep.
Choose life. Choose this. Choose that. And everything that he lists is the sort of mundane, right?
yeah,
It's and really the thing is with heroin, it wasn't that he was a heroin addict. That's not it. I think it's making a more profound point regarding life. That
yeah,
life is an addiction. It's life is addictive. People are addicted to life. Of course, we have this instinct of self-preservation, which is almost an instinct for addiction to life, right? Now, I'm not
yeah,
saying that's a bad thing. I'm not saying run out and fling yourself in front of a bus. No, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm making a wider point regarding when we look at the truth, right, of things. It's naturally deleterious, meaning it destroys us, right? It breaks us down, and we have to build ourselves back up from that, that foundation point. It's like a collapse of the Tower of Babel, right? That the excess of life produces, death. Like it produces what is cancer, but an abundance of life, right?
yeah,
So therefore, um, it's similar to what I stated in that discussion, right, about that poet, that poem. Pardon, I forget who stated it. Death asks life, "Why do people love you more than me?" And life replies, "Because I am the beautiful lie, but you are the painful truth." Right, and
yeah,
that's the crux of it. That life. The problem is with the normies is they love life too much. That they don't see the shadows of it. They don't see
They're
the
fucking
hues
yeah,
of it.
normies. They're fucking normies. That's the problem.
And they're normies as well, yeah. They don't see the shadows of it. They don't see the hues of it. So therefore they don't see the full perspective of it. They just see a one-dimensional view of it. That's why they're thick as fucking shit, you know?
They're
So
not
pardon my
holy. They're
French.
not holy.
They're
They're
not
not.
whole. The whole.
Yeah.
The whole. They don't see the whole of it. They don't see. They only see the the in two dimensions. They don't see the shadow of life. The
Yeah,
thing that
yeah, yeah,
stands behind it. It's a bit like the light in the cave. It
yeah,
it doesn't project. It does not project. The light does not project its own uh,
yeah.
shapes. It is the
It's absence.
shadow. Yes, 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 yes. That's it.
I think Reagan said it. Oh Jesus, I've lost my train of thought. Reagan said it one time. Oh no, it popped out of my head. Sorry, it'll come back to me. Can he made the point?
If any of
Sorry.
you other guys want to jump in, just jump in, guys. If you have anything to add. Sorry, Zeal. Just
No, sorry. I'm sorry to cut across you. Something came into my head. It's gone out again. Sorry.
yeah, it's similar to that. That if darkness came before everything, that nature and the cosmos has to be naturally subtractive in its growth, right? Again, it's like it's almost it's so fucking crazy to think about. But yeah, it's subtractive in its growth.
A thought experiment of Michelangelo carving the statue of David out of a block of marble. But instead of looking at the finished product, you look at all the shattered shards of marble that he chipped off the block that are on the floor, and you're like, well, what relationship has that mass of marble dust and shattered pieces? What relationship has that on the floor to this form of David?
That was the
You know
mold.
what I mean? But there's some weird relationship, inversely proportional relationship of subtraction.
Sort
I
of.
don't know. Like the
Creation, yeah.
I
creative.
think I would relate it a little more to like, the equation of frequency and time. It's like
Yeah.
inversely proportional,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Time equals 1 over frequency and vice versa, right? Frequency equals 1 over time.
mm,
They're indirectly or directly, inversely proportional to each other. So it has a subtractive nature to it by division.
mm,
And that is creation, right? We divide to create,
mm.
split the cell, semen
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
egg.
mitosis, meiosis, all that good stuff.
And that's how we look at a lot of things. That's how we look at temperature, right? That's how we look at magnetism. That's how we look at electricity. Like all these things have inverse proportional relations to each other.
Yeah.
That's how we quantify them, mathematically.
But what would you call that? Inverse proportional relationships? Yeah, that's
Mhm.
exactly it. That's like the mutually complementary paradox in many ways.
Yeah.
It's, it,
Well,
it-
the frequency equation that I'm saying, that is the equation we use for the waveform.
yes. So
You know?
that is it. That the waveform is merely the illustration of that the truth of that concept. It's the manifestation of it via geometry. Yeah. So wow.
But
Yeah.
in essence, the act of division is an act of destruction because you divide the single into two, so you've destroyed the singular
Yes,
to
but
create.
at the same time, it's also an act of creation.
That's what I
That's
mean.
not true.
Yeah.
It's so
Oh yeah,
crazy.
yeah. That's
It's
mad.
it's both. It's the inverse is also true. It's similar to what I was stating at the beginning. As it's like, is the glass half empty, half full? But what good and evil are essentially the same because they inevitably converge at the same point. They're not the same in the short term, but in the longer term function, the teleology of it, they're exactly the same. It's the same with life and death. In its teleology, in its end function, it is exactly the same.
Yeah, life is the beginning of death. The moment you're born, you begin the process of dying.
Yeah, and then the inverse is true.
Exactly. All death begets new life.
Yeah. So that's what these fuckers are using. They're using, in essence, these truths, these maxims that are.
But they went over the line.
Yes.
Way over the line.
Or did they? Or are they merely instruments of a higher natural rebalancing? Are they going to destroy themselves?
Right.
I know it's obviously that's speculation. But yeah, I do
All of
agree
it
they've
is.
went over the line. All of it is, yeah. You're right.
Well, that is,
Yeah.
even Area Trance brought up that, he was trying to do the argument the other day, and it was like, it's all kind of arbitrary as far as like, yes, you can prove one thing or another using mathematics, but again, you're relating three-dimensional world to a 2D drawing.
Yes.
You can make a 2D drawing always look perfect, but once you get in the 3D, that all goes to shit,
Yeah,
or simple logic breaks it apart, even most times.
there will always be latent mistakes within that, yeah, within that sort of projection, the false projection of some. But in many ways, I mean, we could say I mean, is that what has happened here in terms of the cosmos becoming as it is? Is it a false projection? Are we merely seeing a sort of incompleteness? As we see, obviously, the world feels incomplete. It feels in a fallen state, as the Abrahamism states. You know, is that the reason why? I don't know. But yeah, it's all lots to think about, man.
We could just be at a low point, I don't. Low vibration, high density, however you want to look at it. It's
Yeah.
That's some glass half full type of thinking right there. Sorry.
Yeah.
We went
No,
over
man,
that
no.
while you were
No,
on
no.
mute. The glass half full, half empty.
Yeah, glass half full, half empty.
It's never really empty because it's the idea of the glass in the first place. It's always going to be
Yeah.
full, whether
Right,
it's
it's filled.
air, water, or what.
Yeah.
You can just argue the semantics of the contents of it, but ideally a glass is always open. It's always full and overflowing.
Is it half full or half empty? Yes.
Right.
Exactly, yeah.
Paradox. They're all paradoxes, The
Yeah.
chicken and the egg's another example.
Oh, yeah.
And that to me, like the chicken and the egg, that's the phallic and the womb, right?
Well,
Yeah,
life
yeah.
and death,
Mhm.
right? We can't be dead if we weren't once alive, and we can't be alive if we weren't once dead. Which one's first?
Exactly. Yeah. It's similar to the Orphic egg, that illustration, that ancient illustration. Bataille even states that as well, that there seems to be a rotational force, and then a force in between that. It seems to pull like a tug of war, fighting for equilibrium, for an equilibrium state. That seems to be the thing that generates existence. Obviously, you have that same thing within the sex act as well, as he states.
I would assume
Yeah,
the yin and yangs in all this too.
the yin and yang, yeah. That's all. It's cross cultural. I honestly, I think there's been. Here's a weird thing, right? It's also in Göbekli Tepe. It's also etched into the walls of Göbekli Tepe. There was a video that I was watching very recently regarding the eagle tablet there. That these same forms are etched into there, and funnily enough, you have a star map there, and it discusses the four quadrants. Basically, what we are discussing right now, this sort of zodiacal cycle. You have Scorpio, the Signet, a few other stars, and then it was a sort of large metropolis. They've speculated about 100,000 people lived there. We're talking about 12,000 years ago. So this is supposedly there was no agriculture at this point, right? Which to sustain a metropolis of 100,000 people, you had to have agriculture. So therefore, it's discussing an ancient civilization, right? And potentially a global civilization. And it just out, I believe it's called Karen Tepe. It's just east of it, maybe. It's very close. I forget how close now. It is basically a temple to Sirius, which is also mentioned as the Black Star in some esoteric books, which is interesting. That links to obviously the Black Sun, potentially. It's all. So this stuff has been known about for tens of thousands of years. I mean, human history. There seems to be eons of human history. Then there's a great grand reset, meaning like a total collapse, like Tower of Babel, Atlantis, Noah's Ark type flood, and then it begins again. But the idea always remains. This idea, it's just it's never ending. It's extreme. I mean, it's extremely interesting. It's how do you get that where there's star maps from 12,000 years ago, supposedly? Again, supposedly, we don't know fully, but officially, that has a Scorpio on it that has the scorpion, relating to Scorpio on our modern astrological zodiac, right, our zodiacal wheel. It's a bit. It's
Gives a lot of evidence to different things,
yeah. It speaks
reincarnation, your Akashic records,
Akashic records. Yeah. Good idea. Yeah, I never thought of that. Yeah, your Akashic record. Yeah.
Well, if it supposedly works that way, we're all so connected. It's, and we don't necessarily have an idea of where consciousness comes from outside of this possible force that created everything or something akin to that.
What is everybody's opinion regarding ancient civilizations and the potential of them? A global ancient civilization that's now been,
I think there's many.
Yeah.
And I think they got just like similar points to us. Maybe some more advanced and some less, more caveman style. And then you had the ones that were more of metropolises that, they had like the floating hoverboards and they built stuff with those types of devices, and i.e. the pyramids all over the world and things like
Yeah.
that, And then, yeah, I think it's just it gets destroyed, decimated by internal corruption, and then you can call it a reset, sure. We're constantly resetting, I think, just on micro and macro cycles. And yeah, I would say whatever ruling group, like you said, like what we call the Hebrews over many thousands of years, maybe for the last couple thousand, kind of had this secret the whole time where they understood power and how to, stay in that power position or whatever it is, right? Whatever these secrets are they utilize from the Kabbalist or the occult.
Yep. I'm pretty much 100% on board. Well said.
Yeah, I have nothing else to add to that. I'm in total agreement.
I was going to say, I wanted to interject something, but it's kept building and building. It's like, oh, sorry. Kept stealing the thoughts.
Ah, sorry.
You're just too good with the words, man. I know.
Well,
What's
if
everyone
that's
else
just,
is?
yeah,
Oh,
I don't
sorry,
know.
Regan.
Is I'm gonna have something? Well, I was just gonna say, like, I don't know if I'm exactly right, or I think that's kind of helped along the way. Always knowing that we might be wrong, or there's other avenues to explore.
Well,
And
that's
like you're
it. Yeah.
saying with the one guy who's crazy, I usually listen to the crazy people first. They usually have bouts of. Um, I was just discussing this with someone the other day. I was trying to explain how I thought Gary Busey has these random like
No.
bits of things that he says that if you talk in these types of circles, he makes perfect sense sometimes.
Yes, it's like almost schizo language.
Right. Like Chevy
Yeah.
Chase does it too,
Yeah.
like since he's lost his marbles and
Well,
most other
it's
famous
like that
people.
old adage: everyone's a lunatic, but philosophers are those who have identified their own delusions and the truths within them. So yeah, it's similar to that, I guess. And we're all lunatics. I mean, I'm the biggest fucking lunatic of them all. So, we're all crazy, but yeah, it's about making sense of the craziness, I guess.
Hey, that's what
Inherent within us.
the trees told us that. They said we're the brave ones. They're the
Oh,
lucky ones.
don't start saying that, man. That gives them grounds to come and take you away. The trees are talking to you. Nah, I'm only joking, man. But yeah,
I hope
yeah.
so.
I hope
I'd
so as
rather be
well.
taken away at this point. It would just justify everything, right?
Yeah,
I knew it, right? I could go out just saying I was right. Be good right there.
the final chapter of my life. One flew over the cuckoo's nest or something. Yeah.
Oh,
But
man.
it's crazy, like the whole subverted history concept to me alone. Like,
Oh yeah.
I don't know about you guys when you were sitting in history class, but it just seemed like they're teaching you about a bunch of clowns and like half the stories are made up.
Mm-hmm.
And you can question all you want. How do you know that's true? And no matter what, like in our generation of history teachers, it was just, well, that's the way it was.
Yeah, that's
This
what I
this
got as
guy
well.
this guy's really smart who wrote this book, and it's like, well, this guy that wrote this book wrote the same book as in all of the high schools in America.
Yeah.
So you're really banking on one guy here, or like what? There's normally like 3 authors on those textbooks. That's
Exactly.
it. You're banking on 3 dudes, and they're not even like known, right? Like they're not famous for anything. They didn't
And
really
then
do anything.
I randomly learned this yesterday, but the textbook company McGraw-Hill, I think they're the largest one in the U.S. They've
Yes.
existed since the late 40s.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like,
too long.
but you think about it, right? Like they could have been shaping history since right after World War II, any time prior to that. And it adds up with everything you just said.
Well,
I'm not
they've
saying
even
this.
started to change histories today from what we learned, 10, 20 years ago, depending on your age. Like there's all these new people coming out, right? They're completely rewriting it with different minorities have now invented everything, and uh, anyone of white or Caucasian background, it was all lies, right? But I know
Perpetuated by the white man. Yep.
well, that's just the latest and greatest in the racial war that's going on, right? But as far as just changing the history in the first place, I wouldn't care if it was even still white people, but they were like, oh, yeah, Einstein and this guy were all bullshit. Not, it was really these dudes from California that did everything and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like just the fact that you're rewriting something, you're taking the actuality, the truth of what happened and changing it.
Right. And
Just
then by extension, yeah, just throws everything into question, right?
right. That's where, to me, everything was given to us. We're given the internet, these apps, we're given the books, you're given the information at school, you're given the information from your parents. So everything is given. So, ironically enough, the only way to even find truth is by subtracting, by deduction. Like, what else do we have to go off? What,
Yeah.
truth? Yeah,
Falsification of things. Yeah.
right. I just wonder what that I've never been able to find one solid thing that we can hang on to and say this is absolute and we can base all knowledge off of this in some way. You know what I mean? Like there is no one defining fact of anything. The only thing that we know is like I think we know that we're alive and conscious and animate and stuff like that. Other than that, right? We really don't know anything. You've been taught everything from day one.
Yeah.
The only objective truth that I've run into is that things change.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
right, absolutely. It's a fundamental law of the universe, just entropy, constant state.
but there's nothing solid and steady, right?
Yeah, exactly. Everything's always changing. That's why positive entropy is more chaos, right?
What do you think, Zeal? I don't think he asked Zeal the question what he thinks as far as what was it? How do you think past civilizations were? I guess, or maybe Silas, you can reiterate the question.
I think specifically you were asking too if we thought there was a past globally unified
Yeah.
civilization.
I don't know if I can. I mean, I don't know if this is an answer to the question or if it's a diversion from the question. But people like Steiner had it that past civilizations or past incarnations of men were completely different. Like they had a completely different relationship with the physical world and a different manifestation of consciousness, etc., etc. So,
That's an interesting thought.
yeah, the sky is the limit on it. Like you can.
Yeah.
It ties in with the esoteric stuff, like the even the Nazis, I suppose, apprehended that stuff with Aryan, the God Man, trying to bring man like the in the esoteric tradition. There's this kind of a school of thought that man was in a higher form. Silas, you probably know more about this than I do, but and that would have been a manifestation of a prior civilization or a prior manifestation of man. Whether you'd equate that with Atlantis or even older manifestations of the form of man or human. And but like in order to try and get, you'd have to think about a totally different type of consciousness, a different relationship of self, a different relationship to the physical environment. Like Steiner talks about stuff like, thought being essentially electrical impulses in the brain, and matter at the atomic level somehow comprised of, as he says, that the atom is frozen thought, or thought in a static form, so that he kind of insinuates that it is possible for man to affect matter via thought. And I think that was one of the things he said, and I think he's inferring that the next manifestation of man will be able to do that, like that we'll acquire these talents or reacquire them. But like when you get into this territory, it really is sky's the limit stuff. But there's what you see, you have to go into, I think, into the esoteric tradition, into the occult, or into mythology to sort of get any type of reference points for even the concepts around it. And I know Steiner talks about Freemasonry in its modern form, and Theosophy sort of having a kind of a relational role for the manifestation of the new age or the next age of man. And so I don't know. I don't know if that's an answer to the question. But like, it's fucking like, this is the one thing that bamboozles me is a little bit is like, I can get my head around the macro stuff that, like, what Silas and Regan are speaking about there as being the hidden arcane sort of concepts that are known to the few, that have been utilized by the few to circle the wagons and keep themselves in power over history, and the cyclical harvesting of man, and the excess, etc., the accursed share, so to speak. But my curiosity is, do they have specific technologies and or esoteric methods that they utilize? Is there something that they know that we don't know, or that they have some that might be a technological manifestation, for example, of the concept and the hardware of it, so to speak, and or the engineering capacity to manipulate these forces, etc. Or is that just science fiction thinking, do you think?
That's a great question. I mean, I wanted the same thing all the time, and I don't think we'll ever probably get an answer till it's to our detriment.
Yeah, same.
Just to speculate, if I speculated on an answer, I think not to give you a specific answer, but I would speculate that if such a thing existed, it would be some sort of a mechanism or system whereby it was not a finite. You had a pot, for example, that you could put your hand into the dark pot and pull out whatever. It would be some system that could manifest. You could sort of improvise with the core ingredients of it, be it an actual technology or some sort of a consciousness married to a technology, and you can call it what you will after that, a science or a magic. But there's some manner by which you could actually manipulate matter / consciousness, and on any given scale, including on the scale of managing society, that there was some mechanism in there. But again, it may be just a science fiction type thinking, but I have some suspicion or instinct that they do have something in there somewhere. But again, I feel like, as we say in Ireland, a bull staring into the thistles in a field, looking into the thistles, and I know I can't eat them, and I'm just thinking, trying to figure out, get my instincts going.
So Dr.
Kind of
Emoto, I think he, there's proof in Dr. Emoto's work that thought can affect matter. I believe that the elite are reincarnated. This is like part of the deal they made. They're reincarnated in groups at minimum, and so if they can't dodge the mind wipe after reincarnation, they are consistently giving a thorough oral history to each other, so they basically don't have to suffer from the lack of understanding of this place, because they can raise each generation with a contiguous oral history that is actually legit for their means. And as far as the tech goes, yeah, I believe they have electromagnetic technology that's like, some of the high level Tesla stuff. It's found all now in what I call the Eastland patents. Bernard Eastland, all his patents encompass a lot of this stuff. For instance, like with the particle accelerator type stuff and other technology like the NextRad, I think I'm 100% certain they can change the composition of the atmosphere at will, or the atmos. I don't like sphere anymore. Just atmos.
But is there some other, perhaps some sort of again, science fiction Twilight Zone stuff? Can they create a god or a kind of a portable god, a laptop god that they can essentially channel that kind of creative impulse to make or to affect the reality, like that they have something that's way beyond what we can even conceive?
Like the blue beam idea.
I'm literally talking about a genie in a bottle, Regan, I guess.
I mean, that's what that is. It's like they can turn the sky into a digital screen and make it look like aliens are coming or meteors or whatever, right? And then you could just have actual um, uh, fighter jets and all that kind of stuff really coming through and dropping actual bombs, right? But at least have the digital spaceships and stuff floating around.
Well, in the Eastland patents, they have it details how a simulated heat type nuclear explosion. So basically, just a big, powerful explosion can just be caused to happen anywhere, just through electromagnetic tech. So they can, disable a missile, tear it apart, slow it down, or have an explosion just happen right out of nowhere, just through that type of tech. So, like I said for a while, that I think they have been able to usurp our creator power. We have some influence on this realm. I think that's obvious. And, for instance, I like the easiest way to like explain it in my head is like a Friday afternoon on a radio station in like, New York or wherever. They have, 30,000 people chanting the same chant by following along with a song. And I think all of that is very well thought out, and it's for a reason to channel our energy into what they want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a mantra, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very multi-layered, right? All the different stuff in rock music and all the pop culture they give us is like all that vibration. If we're tagging along with it, I mean, it's focused somewhere, doing something.
But it's like, as you kind of intimate there, the focus of energy or consciousness seems to, potentially has a magical effect. So, you're entering a time now where there's a huge centralized focusing of human consciousness in through, the light pipe, the zeros and ones. So it would seem like that perhaps we will see the genie appear, and it'll be an artifact of consciousness relating with matter. And, we inadvertently create something that's chaotic.
Isn't reality just an artifact of consciousness?
Yeah, it is. It is. But what I'm kind of trying to drive at is a sort of a side effect. Like, say for example, consciousness or reality, as you say, is an artifact of consciousness. But as you channel and funnel and focus, not only do you create the reality, but you also create artifacts, unwitting artifacts, or extraneous characters that were not part of the original plan of reality. So, like, it's again getting into the science fiction thing. Like, I get this feeling we're going to see, God knows what the fuck we'll see. That something is going to pop out of over the horizon. That's going to be the net summation of this all this energy focus of consciousness and of emotion as well, because people's human will is tied up into this kind of thing. So you could be heading into a very unpredictable era, I think. And that
I mean,
that has all.
I think we're seeing it. For me,
Mm.
it's manifesting in the changing history. Like, there was no fucking Tartaria. There was no kind of ancient civilizations that was like unified. The evidence in the history of it didn't exist for me 10 years ago, but it seems to now exist. And I think it's manifesting somewhat like a Mandela effect. And, this is the mechanism, essentially.
But it's there's a bit of like, where does the thing stop? If your consciousness is creating reality, and you, between a scale of 1 to 10, you stop at 5, and 5 is the reality. What's to say you can't go to 6, 7, and 8? And into,
Yeah.
from reality into a sort of a psychosis scenario. Like, I always had this idea, if I was writing a short story or trying to write one, my central character, I tried to bring the reader on a journey where my central character is in a given day-to-day scenario where he is facing some sort of a crisis or some issue in his life. But as the reader is reading the story in the narration, the central character slips into a psychosis, literally a mental health flip. And within the psychosis, the central character still rationalizes that he's sane, yet he's seeing the visions, and he sees himself divided in two, or whatever other manifestations of psychosis happen to the main character. But the reader, from the reader's perspective, he can see. You try to blur the line between the rational mind of the main character and the psychotic mind of the main character, so that you bring the reader along the journey from sanity into psychosis, and you create this sort of a realm where you don't know what's what anymore. So, like, back to the reference point A1, your consciousness creates the reality, and it should stop at 5, because that's the concrete world between 1 and 10. But what's to stop it going to 6, 7, 8? So that's why I think that if you'll take the rather brutal example of psychosis, schizophrenia, or a psychotic break, that the social consciousness is in danger of slipping in past the safe zone into something else. And as you said earlier, we're probably already in it, But who's to say at what point, how bizarre that could become, or how who's to say where it'll go, or how far it'll
Yeah,
go.
Terrence McKenna referenced like where you're going a bunch of times. He said this place is a far more absurd and strange place than we imagine it is.
Yeah. Well, as I think Silas said it earlier on, there the normies are dangerously out of touch with the dark side of things, or the destructive forces. That's why they can't reconcile the world. They have a false vision of the world. So, as you said earlier, the world is a far more, what's the way you put it? It's a far more bizarre than we can understand.
Absurd and weird and strange place than we think it. That we
Yeah,
can
exactly.
imagine it.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's assuming that bizarre world is just over the edge of where we are. But like, if you walk over that edge into that forest, then you really see it. So it's like your consciousness can't resolve that. So the human mind then is into a strange manifestation of consciousness where a psychosis becomes normalized. You normalize this, and this becomes the new normal. It's like a descent into madness. Like, what's to say we're not in a stage of madness right now relative to where we were 10 million years ago? Like, maybe if the guy came on from 10 million years ago, came on the call, and he'd say, these guys are fucking nuts.
Yeah.
No,
They're absolutely nuts.
Bob Proctor's been saying stuff like that. I think he passed, but he said stuff like that. Like, we exist in multiple different dimensions of understanding and reality at the same time, but we are for whatever reason so tied to the physical realm that that's the only one we identify ourselves with, and that could be the psychosis.
Yeah. But you see, it's back to the black box phenomenon of what do they actually know? Like, if the technology, or the factor X is their capacity to manipulate human consciousness, then that would seem to be how do you say, a safe money to put a few quid on, that they have some instinct. Because what else do they need to know? Only the inner workings of the human mind, really. Control, if control and power and
Yeah, but I think they also fall victim to the same things that we do as far as like the automation
yeah,
process.
mm,
Like now we got
mm,
kids that can't even add and subtract, 520 from $10 without the calculator telling them on
yeah,
their
yeah,
cash register. So you have like these people who think about that, Zeal. Like if you're born into it, one of the families, and
yeah,
you're raised with an education far different from the rest of the populace of like some sort of actual history or true history and all these other truths of life in the world, you're given
mm,
everything. There's no struggle. You don't have any
yeah,
struggle with that. So, it's like they're basically setting themselves up to be the worst addicts of all,
yeah,
having all the knowledge and they'll still overlook it. You know,
yeah,
like they're just gonna walk around this world thinking they're above everyone else so much, and that complacency is generally the
yeah,
downfall, right?
yeah.
So
But,
even
but
if they do know whatever secrets and they're utilizing all these psychological advantages over populations, they're also gonna like kill themselves too. So it kind of becomes, you know,
But you get to, depending on how self-aware they are, Reagan, that you could argue that they'll actually allow for that, and they'll allow the population in general to develop a certain amount of awareness around these things with a view to keeping themselves on their toes, sort of thing. Now, that might be a bit
sure,
outside the box, but
no,
It seems to me that they like once we start to gain too much awareness, that's when they do a physical reset because there's like
yeah,
whatever is on the other side is not having us, with nothing to do and just sitting in the woods chanting and figuring out how to affect the other side. That seems to be the physical reset time. And the speculation is that they go underground when the calamities happen and they persist.
yeah.
they got
Well,
the bunkers ready.
yeah, bunker's ready. Yeah, by all accounts. Yeah. But it seems that they would have a cutoff point. Like, let's just say that they do have to hit the red button, that it has to come at a certain point. So they should have some measure. It's like, who makes that call? Like, when do you do that? Like,
Right.
who's checking that
What
gauge?
metric go into that? Yeah.
Go down to the engine room there and check that gauge and fill
Oh, they
out
got
the
the Chat GPT tells them.
Yeah.
yeah,
The other thing I was thinking of is like TikTok and other forms of social media. Let's just use Zielberg's metaphor of the 1 to 10 scale. It almost seems
yeah,
like that's coinciding with actively lowering people's conscious awareness state, like down to like a
mm,
4 or 3, right?
yeah,
Uh, just detaching yourself from your actual current reality, just being absorbed in this
mm,
constant blur of anything else in the world that's interesting
mm,
without ever latching onto one thing in particular.
mm.
So I think my question on that same note is, do you think that there are multiple iterations of a collective consciousness? Like they're different, but maybe like it's split up amongst 2 or 3 different groups, for lack of a better way of thinking about it, where we're actively trying to be upregulated in one sense, and another large sect is being downregulated. It's just kind of this mixture, or is it all completely intertwined as one thing?
I think you're hitting on a very interesting train of thought there, and I think you're on the money in the ballpark of the sense I have of it. That you're talking about multiple strands of consciousness and awareness, but there's a kind of a hyper power unit structure, or whatever you want to call it. There's something in there that's an intelligence of some description, a consciousness intelligence, or at least an awareness of the capacity to manipulate consciousness and understanding vis-a-vis selfhood and the world around us and the inner self and the social self. Like that, there's a very high awareness of how all this stuff works. So, like, and I know I haven't answered your question, but in that sense, Reagan, it's perhaps arguable that they would not become perhaps complacent as such, because they're coming from a kind of an enlightened perspective with all this stuff. So it's kind of like an awakening. You kind of can't become complacent because it's putting you onto some higher pivot point vis-a-vis the masses. And you're actually at it's like the difference between me and the dog. I love the dog and all, but I know I can. The dog can't watch an episode of his favorite soap opera and understand what I have that little edge over him, and I can just sit there.
Soap opera.
I can sit there and just take in my friend's episode and listen to what Joey and Chandler are saying, but the dog can't really understand what they're saying. I don't have to get off my ass, and that's just the relationship. So now it's like more like a power relationship or an awareness relationship. But what that gentleman said there around a kind of a theory of multiple consciousnesses or some mechanism or device which is somehow intertwined into that kind of thinking that this, and again, I know I'm very, very specious and kind of cloudy, but it's the best language or terms I can think of to use to describe something that I have no real bearing on, but I'm just trying to give it some sort of vague form, But I don't.
I think that's kind of answering the question better than any well-constructed words could.
But a vague form is a lot to be said for it, because like sometimes when you peer into a thing, you see shapes, and the shapes are indecipherable as anything you may realize, but through a process of sort of pareidolia, or however you pronounce it, picking faces out of the clouds, you start to. There's a sort of you take a relationship with that formless thing. But again, it's back to this: what goes over the 5 into the 6 or the 7. At some point, there's a relationship between what you perceive and the creative act of pareidolia. That seeing the face in the cloud is like a creative act, because you're making faces out of those shapes. And in the same manner as this thing, as you make the faces out of the formless, they take on their own reality in some weird way.
Yeah.
So you're into that type of sorcery. Then you're actually going. Well, I just thought it looked like that, and next thing you find that it is that, and you're like, well, that's not what I meant. I just thought, and then you realize, oh, hold on, I've actually pulled something out of the ether here, and there's been a weird harmonic resonance between whatever happened in my mind and what is now seems to have occurred. So there's something going on there, I think, along those lines with them. It's along those kinds of lines that they can peer into the thing and make it so, or use this creative spark or whatever. There's something, I think.
And if not, our minds have certainly done a good job of convincing us that's the case. But I'm right there with you. I think that
there's the hard smoke and mirrors, we'd say, of propaganda, manipulation of statistics, fake wars, fake presidents, fake governments, media. And then there's the other fucking thing, which is much deeper. And like, as long as the public are looking at the fakery, they don't think down into this deeper level very often, because it's too difficult to actually even conceptualize it, even in a vague sense, let alone try and understand it,
Oh, yeah.
But I think when that third eye, just let's use that term, when that third eye is open and you can understand in that way, there's no way really back from that point. There's you changed, and you've changed man into something else. He's a higher version of himself, or a god version of himself, or whatever way, a sorcerer. But you've changed something. And I think at that point, once you're in there, everything else looks different then, from then on. Then you're over the line. There's a whole other ball game going on. Things like morality and up and down, left and right, all are become subjective terms that you can melt and chop it up and tie it in different directions and play jazz with it. Yeah.
Well, now you're connected to that creative spark that they're utilizing against you, or the knowledge of it.
Yeah. Totally.
It was
But you
kind of
see, you could,
interesting the way you were talking about. For whatever reason, I was thinking of a kaleidoscope for most of that
yeah,
time,
yeah,
because
oh
that's
yeah,
and essentially like that's what it is the key component that they or them, quote unquote, have any control over people is keeping the public's eye in front of that kaleidoscope.
yeah,
And it's like for those who, let's say, like this, your third eye or whatever is awakened, you can see the kaleidoscope for what it truly is.
yes, 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 yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right? You pulled away from it. You're like, oh, okay, it's just this little tube with colored glass at the end.
Yeah, well, there's other things around here.
Right. And that's dangerous to them
yeah.
because that's the control mechanism. If you lose that, you don't have that.
But you see, you have the kaleidoscope and you have the viewer. Man views the image through the kaleidoscope.
Yes.
So they present the image as abstract, jarring image through the kaleidoscope. But I think the bit I'm just throw this out as a suggestion, is that the bit I'm on about, the darker, deeper, more vaguely conceptual thing, is they also affect the mind of man, either simultaneously or maybe to a lesser or greater extent. So that not only is the image distorted, but the mind of the viewer is also completely unbolted, and it's cast adrift, like that. They can manipulate both at the same time. So it's, as above, so below, as the image, so the viewer as well are completely unhooked. So who's to know that, like, the black box of the they is actually a different consciousness. It's a completely different way of understanding of mind, and you could be dealing with something that's, you throw around those terms, alien, not necessarily alien from another planet, but alien in terms of what we would understand as normative consciousness.
Yeah.
And
There's
if,
so many different uses for aliens just
yeah,
crossing borders,
yeah.
coming from space, whatever. It's different.
Yeah,
But you imagine your sorcerer, shaman archetype in the forest, deep in the forest, living on his own outside the cave, and he's blind. He's got those milk white eyes, and there's a wolf at his side and a raven in the tree, and he sits in front of the fire for months on end in silent meditation with a basic woolen blanket around him. And one day you go to meet him, and he can sense you coming, and he's looked straight at you, and you know instantly that he knows everything about you and every thought that you have in your mind, and you're just beholden by him in that moment. And it's just that immense sense of fear and chaos and at kind of peace at the same time in your mind, some emotional state that you can't comprehend, and you're in the presence of something that you don't fully understand is probably greater than yourself. So it's kind of like, that's the kind of picture I have of that type of caricature, that presence that they've
My kind
evolved.
of character, Zeal.
I beg your pardon?
It's my kind of character.
Yeah, except that the fucker's trying to do you in. This is the problem. He's trying to do you in.
he's bored.
Far
He's
from.
been through the fire for years.
Yeah,
Patiently
exactly. He's been there for millions. He's been there for eons. And for eons he's been there, and he is quite, and like we're just like prey.
Yeah, I mean it's the ultimate arch enemy of
Yeah,
yourself. That's the thing
yeah.
you got to realize, though. If it's lived here for it's just something that's existed here for whatever length of time.
I
Everything
think.
else doesn't. Everything else dies. So for that thing
Yeah,
to live that long, it had to kill. It
yeah.
had to live off the death. We do too, though. That's talking in the paradoxical stuff. We have to consume things, not every day, but most days to continue on, right? Things have to die for us to live. You know.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
when you look at the 5,000-year-old man,
Yeah.
sorcerer in the woods, that's just something that's existed for such a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that's where I would say that thing crossed the Rubicon. It
Yes,
crossed the
totally.
stream. Yeah. The only way for it to continue living is it needs to prey on stuff like us. That's its only
But
way to exist.
I don't know, did you let something slip there accidentally, or maybe I actually heard you wrong? But as part of the thought experiment, you as you present in front of the character and this avalanche of emotions come over you, you realize that there's some part of you is in him, and you
Yeah,
have
that's
that
what I
moment where
was
there's
saying. It's you.
yeah, yeah, it's you.
You're facing yourself.
Yeah,
You're just facing a version that's lived here for a couple thousand
yeah,
years instead of one that's your age or the
yeah,
one in the mirror, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That is kind of
That-
the whole like trick of the whole thing
That's
is,
it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you're
That's
always
it.
fighting yourself because we're all man.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's I'm going to bow out of here. That's a great image metaphor to, I don't know, chew on. Sometimes I think you're better off to chew on something like that.
Yeah.
Just to have that as a picture in your head. It doesn't bring you anywhere, or it's not trying to tell you anything. It's just an image, and it's very instructive in some deep way. But I
Well, do
think,
you like peace or do you like drama?
do I like peace or do I like drama?
Yeah.
Is it? Fuck, man. You see, I suppose you crave a little bit of either, don't you?
Yeah, as I said,
Different,
both has to be the answer pretty much across the board,
yeah,
whether that's conscious or not.
But like you're saying, where you're gonna go and chew on this, thought experiment, what we've discussed, and to
yeah,
me, that's where you're seeking peace and to sit with it. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
For drama, yes.
There it is.
And that is a very powerful moment, just to sit across from the thing and to be present with it, and in its audience, in its sphere, and kind of a meeting of forces, and let that be the eternal moment. Like, let the story have no ending as such. But there's just that countenance, that beholding of that moment of encounter, and it looks at you and you look at it, and it's just that eternal kind of moment, unresolved and perpetual, yet, as you say, there's a peace in it, like, because you've met it.
Yeah. I don't know. I think what's the worst it's gonna do to you? Kill you,
Well, it's already done it.
right?
It brought you to that point where you already crossed the Rubicon. You were on the hard roads. You were through the thorns. You nearly drowned off the shipwreck. You ran from the lava flow. You fucking got the tiger, the scorpion, all of it. And you went through all the loss, the death, everything, and to arrive there. And it knew, and you knew what all that meant. And it was just at that moment, it was just, I'm here.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's good stuff to me. I don't know. I think about
Yeah,
this most days. You know, and really, that's kind of the key. Like, it's life goes on. It's the waveform of life. We exist here, and
yeah,
it's continuous. So it's good to find those moments of peace and solace and sit with things to digest and understand. But we live in this act of motion. You know.
yeah,
And that constant moving. Yeah, and a lot of times when we think about all this stuff, I just think of the age-old question in most workplaces, right? Like what you get asked, or I've been asked a lot in my travels, like what makes you get up in the morning, right?
Yeah.
Money.
Right.
Pay
That's
my
the
bills.
typical response, right?
Spite. That's it. Spite for whatever
Spite.
doesn't want me to get up. Yeah, whatever doesn't want me to get up. Fuck you. I'm here anyway.
Yeah. Spite. Pure spite. I got up out of spite. Just spit in your eye.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, it's there's a whole other level there with a lot of this stuff. I suppose spiritual, yeah. It's such a bandied, thrown around term, but you see, when you hit into that realm of thinking, everyone knows exactly what you're talking about, even though you may not be making any sense on so many levels. But it's like everyone gets it. It's like a deeper level. It's kind of beyond language and concrete concepts. You kind of nearly have to talk about it in poetic terms, where you're abstract terms.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Beyond language, and that's I don't think of the pretty much everything that we're talking about right now.
Yeah. Seamus Heaney, it was an Irish poet. Seamus Heaney had a poem roughly about it. It was called Postscript. And he talks about going for a drive, actually in the county I'm in now, County Clare, up along the west coast of Ireland. And he talks about the wind hitting the car. And there's a line in it, it's useless to think you'll park or capture it more thoroughly. It being whatever that, that spirit is like. And he goes, you were neither here nor there, or hurry through which known and strange things pass, as winds catch the car sideways and big soft buffetings blow against the car or something like that, he says. And he just drifts off in the poem. He kind of drifts off into a non-ending, and but he leaves it in a really like he leaves you high and dry, with the language. And he just says something that's kind of universal, that his realization of the mystery, the mystery of things, that unquantifiable. And even though it's something that leaves you in a sense alone, it's at the same time it's the most home you can be. At home, it's the most found you can be, because you've made that inner connection. Again, maybe that metaphor, you're in front of that blind shaman and there's no word exchange, but there's a moment where you're and he knows, and there can be no further extrapolation. It just merely ends at that point, that unresolved point, an unresolved ending. Anyway, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Oh, good talk, Zeal.
Likewise, man. I love getting to talk about this shit.
Yeah, great to talk to you. Like I said, there's something in it. I don't know what it is, but there's something in it. But I hope some of you, I think I can feel some of you actually on the call know what I'm on about. And I know what you're on about, even though none of us might have the full words to describe it, or even the full way to conceive it. But that's actually, that's a great place to be.
It is a great place to be.
It's
kind of that communication that it's almost telepathy in a way.
Yeah. God bless you all.
Synchronicity.
God bless you all, and good night. And please never stop thinking and never give up on.
Yeah, likewise, you.
Good night, gents. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night.